had 7 children together, but unfortunately, only 2 of those 7 children lived past infancy. So the oldest that lived past infancy was Grace, and like I said, she came over with them when they moved to the Salt Lake Valley, and then their other daughter was Annie. Hello, welcome to week 11 of Mix It Up Black History in the Restoration, where we mix up a recipe and we mix up the Restoration by learning about early African American members of the church. I'm Taylor Ricks, and today we're going to be learning about Johanna, Dorothea, Louisa, Langeveld, Provis. She has a lot of names. So Johanna, we're going to be learning about today, and we're going to be mixing up some hot dog buns because my kids want some hot dogs and I'm out of buns, so I thought we'll just make some today. So Johanna was born May 7, 1825, and she was born in Cape Province, South Africa. And in that area of South Africa, in the 17th and 18th centuries, some Dutch settlers had come there, and they had they lived there and kind of took over the area. So a lot of the people there were Caucasian or white. They were Dutch descent. But Johanna's great-great-grandfather was born there, and he was black, he was African, but he was noted in all of the records at the time as being a wealthy black man that lived there. But other than that, the rest of her family was Dutch, so she was a pretty fair complexion when you consider it was her great-great-grandfather who was African and the rest were Dutch. So, Johanna's husband Richard moved south to the same area that she lived in when she was about 26 years old, and they soon got married after that. So, 2 years after Johanna and Richard were married, they were baptized by William Holmes Walker. And at the time, William Holmes Walker also baptized with his mission companion 45 people in the area. And in his records, he only recorded 2 people of being black, and that is Rachel Hannibal and Sarah Harris. Everyone else he did not list a race for, which means that to him, he thought that Johanna must have been more Dutch than African and didn't even record her race at all. So they were baptized in 1853 with that group of 45 people, and they still lived in Africa until 1860. And that is when they decided to get on a boat and head on over to Boston. And from Boston, they came over to the Salt Lake Valley. So, and their journey was relatively quick, I guess, because by January 6, 1831, they were already re-baptized in the Salt Lake City 13th Ward. So they had already come back. So now, if you're keeping count, that means that the Provises, Johanna and Richard, have been baptized twice so far. And they came over with their daughter, Grace, and within a couple weeks, they moved to 627 South, 600 East in Salt Lake City, and they lived in their home there for the rest of their lives. And they had 7 children together, but unfortunately, only 2 of those 7 children lived past infancy. So the oldest that lived past infancy was Grace, and like I said, she came over with them when they moved to the Salt Lake Valley, and then their other daughter was Annie. And both have a record of being baptized into the church. And the Provis family was poor most of their life. In fact, they had so many different jobs, like gardener, bricklayer, even Richard was listed as a fireman, but the date that was listed as him being a fireman, he would have been 71 years old. So if he was a fireman, it probably wasn't at the time that they claimed that the records say that he was, but they did a lot of just random jobs to kind of keep afloat. In fact, there are some tax records that say that they asked for a tax break of $5 because of financial and also medical hardship that they were facing. And a record that Eliza R. Snow kept as the General Relief Society president shows that Johanna gave rags, tape, eggs, and soap to contribute to the funding and the building of the Relief Society. So she gave what she had, which was incredible and amazing. Now, here's our third baptism, because in 1875, Richard was called to serve on the Quorum of 70, which we remember from past videos at the time was recorded, was considered to be like a mission call more so than like a general authority. So he was called to that, and they were baptized for the third time, and I think one of their daughters was baptized at that exact time as well. And just further showing that they were committed to living the gospel. And another indication that most of the church records do not call Johanna black at all is that they were able to be sealed in the endowment house that was there until the temple was built. You'll remember, obviously, the Salt Lake Temple took 40 years, so they did their endowment and sealings in the endowment house until that happened. And they were sealed, Richard and Johanna were sealed in the endowment house on April 20th, 1861. So a little bit, a few years before that third baptism. But I just think of how sweet that must have been to be able to be sealed as a couple in the temple, especially with how much loss they had faced. They had lost 5 children, and it doesn't say specifically that their children were sealed to them, but I don't know if you're aware of like a tradition that was held until 1894. A tradition that happened a lot in the church is that children would be sealed to their parents if the parents were sealed after the children were born. But if a parent, if an adult had a parent that wasn't like an active member of the church and they weren't sealed to anybody as a child, so for example, say I wasn't sealed to my parents, then they would just randomly pick somebody that they loved that did live the gospel, and they would go and get sealed, and they called them adoption sealings, but it wasn't like formal adoption. It was like an adult to another adult trying to be sealed, and they did that for a really long time, and a lot of times it would be to a prominent church leader like a prophet or something, and they would be sealed to him. And so in 1894, Wilford Woodruff's like, we need to just focus on sealing actual parents to actual children and husbands and wives, and he also then like really encouraged family history work so that people could be sealed to their own actual parents instead of just kind of picking who they would want to be their parents. So that's kind of a bit of a tangent, but I thought that was interesting to share because it doesn't specifically say that the Provises were sealed to their children that they lost at the time, but I also wonder if that could have been because the tradition in 1861 when they were sealed was a lot different than what we know we're supposed to be doing now and what's expected of us now. So I just found that to be kind of interesting. So regardless of the fact that they struggled in poverty for most of their life, the state records show that they owned their home by the time their lives came to an end. It's a terrible way to say it. By the time they passed away, they did own their homes, and so they must have been blessed for their sacrifices and for their effort because although they did struggle financially, they were able to have a home of their own. And Johanna passed away before her husband Richard, 2 years before him, in 1907, September 7th, and her death certificate said that she died of paralysis, and the state health department says something similar. And people that have studied it and looked into it more think it was paralysis, maybe due to something like a stroke. And you'll remember when they asked for that $5 off tax break that I mentioned earlier, that they noted that it was due to health constraints or health problems. So it's possible that she or Richard or both of them have been struggling with health issues for a really a long time before they passed away. So 2 years later, like I said, Richard passed away as well, and they are both buried next to each other in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. And that is the story of Johanna, Dorothea, Louisa, Langeveld, Provis. Lots of beautiful names. I'm gonna just let these rise on the pan, and then they bake for about 10 minutes, and then you just cut them up and they're ready to go. So they're super easy and really make a hot dog a little more delicious. Thank you so much for coming to week 11 of Mix It Up, Black History and the Restoration. I really enjoyed getting to know these stories and sharing them with you, and it's been really fun to talk with you about them and hear your thoughts on them and your amazing support. It has been so fun, and I just look forward to doing this all year with you. Thanks, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.